Let's see if we can pick up a bit of speed in this. Question 17, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Whether government plans to establish regional sites where people can access government services, and what planning work is being undertaken with local authorities and the Post Office.
The Minister for Policy and Reform, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. President. When the Welcome Centre was transferred to the Cabinet Office in 2015, the principal driver for the move was developing the Welcome Centre as a customer contact hub, which would develop into a contact centre for government services. It was the intention that the model could be replicated in other locations to create regional contact centres. Work continues to develop the range of government services accessible via the Welcome Centre. Initial discussions have taken place with one local authority as to how services delivered by the Welcome Centre could be replicated there. Mr. President, we would welcome any approaches from other local authorities interested in replicating Welcome Centre services if feasible. The concept of the delivery of government services beyond those already delivered through Isle of Man Post Office network has been explored by the Post Office as part of the review of its services, I believe.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Can I ask the Minister how widespread he is anticipating these contact centres will be around the island, and whether he's considered the concept of a mobile government office similar to a mobile library where people can come in rural communities accessing government services, whether that be help with their tax return or selling stamps?
Minister.
That concept can be considered in the processes that are ongoing to enhance the digital service delivery, but making into account that the digital service is inclusive. Also around the customer first concept, as it was once called, which is at the heart of the smart service framework, and also the general focus in government on making sure that we put the customer at the heart of everything we do.
Honourable Member for Onken, Miss Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm pleased that the Minister acknowledged that Isle of Man Post Office are actually working on some of these issues, but I think the question was quite clear. Has the Minister undertaken work with Isle of Man Post Office? And I think he knows the answer to that one. I'd just like to point out to the Minister in the digital strategy under item 38, it states customer service approach to customer records to allow multi-channel service through contact centres, example Welcome Centre and post offices. So I'm just wondering if the Minister can advise why Isle of Man Post Office hasn't been involved in any of that work.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Post Office has been involved, and I believe negotiations could continue again.
Ms. August Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I ask the Minister if there's an appetite across the Council of Ministers to, in his own opinion, as to whether or not the Isle of Man Post Office would be at the centre of this particular project?
Minister to reply.
Post Office conversations concluded with the Post Office considering the costs and benefits that might be involved in delivering the services of the Welcome Centre in regional centres. So the Post Office will be coming back in October with a retail services strategy, and I would hope very much that they'll report on those conversations, which I've got very specific information here, that have taken place between officers from the Post Office and from the people involved in the Welcome Centre, and I imagine similar discussions have gone on with the digital strategy, but I haven't got those in front of me.
So I'm having terrible trouble hearing you, Minister, if you kindly speak up. Thank you very much. Mr. Robert Shaw.
Mr. President, I think the Minister in his reply, in his original reply, misunderstood your direction about speeding up. Because, and in terms of the volume of his answer, if you put the two together, it's a clear indication that the Minister effectively is uncomfortable with his answer, bumbled through it and wanted to get to the end as quickly as possible. Is it not therefore true that what we're getting from the Policy and Reform Minister here is a lot of mumbled quick words and no real action?
Yeah.
Minister.
Not at all. This whole process of putting the customer at the heart of public services, at the heart of our programme for government, that we've paid so much attention to developing and agreeing unanimously. We have a digital strategy that started in 2015 under the honourable member's leadership. It was just talk at that point, but now it's action under this Minister of Policy and Reform. And the Post Office was engaged fundamentally. But we have to remember, I called it nuanced, in a nuanced way. I said costs and benefits. There are some members in this honourable court who take the view that it's the job of the public service to provide income for the Post Office for other purposes, and it's not. The public services have to be delivered in a smart way, in an efficient way, making sure that every amount, every pound of public revenue that we get is spent on the public service that is wanted and paid for by the Isle of Man people.
Give him an Oscar.
Honourable members, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I don't think anyone in this court is going to take away from the fact that it should be the taxpayer that is the centre of this strategy. What I'm trying to seek reassurance from the Minister on, and I'm not really hearing it, is that there is work going together, that different parts of government that provide different types of services are going to break out of the Douglas bubble and be deliverable in the communities. Now, I appreciate the Minister said he's in discussion with one local authority, and frankly that isn't really very comforting when it comes to people who are seeing services withdrawn from out in rural communities into Douglas. What more can and is being done about getting departments together, providing a joined-up sense of government and delivering that to taxpayers where they need it, not where we need it?
Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As always, talk and aspiration is a lot easier than action and delivery. And the Mr. Speaker has mixed up two fundamental things in his question there. The first one is the delivery of public service, which can take place more outside Douglas than inside Douglas. And the second point is the one that this question's about, which is putting the customer first and actually having one-stop shop access to all, perhaps, public services, or at least a tested part of it. And there are processes going on in both of those areas. The single legal entity report had a local government transition section in it. That was delivered to this Honourable Court in a laid-before basis in July 2017, and there's specific treatment inside that of a transition towards a regional centre in terms of providing contact, one-stop shop access and information about public services. That is also a project in his hand, and I would like to commend in this honourable court Ramsey Town Council for taking that forward and actually discussing how they can work with government to actually make use of the excellent library that's in Ramsey to see whether we can replicate working together with the Welcome Centre. And I've already said in my first answer that I welcome other approaches from local authorities and from the Post Office to come forward and say how can we help each other to get a better thing. It's not about coming to Cabinet Office and saying can we have £100,000 through you paying us to do something. It's about working out how we can use every ratepayer's money, every pound spent inside the Post Office system, every pound of taxpayers' money to maximise the efficiency of the provision of information about public services and also eventually the delivery of public services. And there are profound work streams going on in both of those areas in terms of the digital strategy, in terms of what we could reactivate as a customer-first strategy across in general, but at the initial stage we've got Welcome Centre projects going on behind the scenes, and we could also link in more fundamentally to things like, I'm going to go quiet now, but local authority reform, and perhaps even Post Office refocus on a customer strategy, which is coming back to this Honourable Court in October. I hope the Honourable Member from Douglas is satisfied.
Yes, much better.
And I hope the Mr. President is satisfied that I followed his instructions to move things on promptly.
The length and speed are different things. Ms. August Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the Minister didn't answer my question, I'm just wondering if perhaps he might reconsider. It is a very, very serious matter, is it not, that we have people bouncing around government at times not being directed to the right places with any level of efficiency. So does the Minister have an indication from the Post Office then that they're happy to get involved, because last time I checked he did. And also, can he just please answer the question as to whether or not the ministers have an appetite across the Council of Ministers, in his opinion, to make the Isle of Man Post Office the manager of regional sites where people access government services? Thank you.
Minister.
So, I repeat, Post Office conversations concluded with the Post Office considering the costs and benefits that might be involved in delivering the services of the Welcome Centre in regional centres. Second point, I mean, the family library sells stamps. That's a practical example of things progress. So we need very specific questions. The thing that annoyed me in that question is a vague allegation that people bounce around between government services. I would like to have specific examples of what we need to do better. We're constantly monitoring the telephone service. We're constantly monitoring the information on the internet sites and in other ways. Constantly monitoring the use of social media channels. Constantly monitoring, as can be demonstrated by the services that are now with the Welcome Centre in 2019 compared to those that were there in 2014. We are constantly monitoring, and we would like information. So rather than making vague allegations generally damaging the delivery of public service, I would hope that we can have some very specific suggestions about how specific people have been confusing at specific time, or specific services are described in confusing ways.
Honourable Member, Miss Edge.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm glad the Minister, when he stood up and spoke about the Post Office, said was involved, because clearly the question on the order paper is with regards to regional sites, and we certainly haven't been involved so far, but we're very welcome to take that on board. But I'd also just like to point out to the Minister, there seems to be policies coming out, one recently in July 2019 with regards to the digitisation, and it says, what does this policy apply to? And it's a parent pay policy and procedures. So was the Minister aware of this? Because it states all employees, contractors, temporary staff, students, partner agencies that work for Isle of Man government departments, boards and officers that use parent pay regardless of location. And all staff using parent pay must read and comply with this policy. If they don't, they'll result in disciplinary action. I want the Minister to confirm, because this is a payment card that is used within education that he doesn't seem to be aware of, and I'm just wondering what that is with regards to, and is that going to end up being a one-card stop for government? But also that we are very, as Chair of Isle of Man Post Office, we want to work with the centre of government to make sure that government services are provided to the people in the right locations, and I'd like the Minister to confirm that he will ensure Isle of Man Post Office is involved.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have ensured that the Post Office is involved, and officers have reported to me on the conversations. I will circulate specific information about that point. That we do now have a policy on the use of cards, and there are 4 cards that are used principally around the public service, all of which will now have their own life, but we now have GTS designated as the gatekeeper to new card services as we move towards e-identity or something like that, away from card system. This is in fact something that was discussed recently in the single legal entity subcommittee briefly, because it's an important part of the move towards one public service. And parent pay, very important part of the service that we try to handle rationally, using things like the Welcome Centre or perhaps even other bodies in the future.
Honourable Member for Douglas Central, Mrs Corlett.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've talked about local authorities and post offices, but what I'd like to ask the Minister for Policy and Reform is he working closely with other government departments, DHSC for example, because what he's describing so passionately is a community hub. And this could and should work very well alongside the Integrated Care Project. Yeah. And it's actually already underway in the west of the island.
Yes, the community hub was actually in the original answer, but we wanted to focus specifically on the things that were asked.
Final supplementary, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Perhaps building on the last question by Mrs. Cole, what I suppose I'm looking for is some reassurance that the government has some plans to reach out into our various communities around the Isle of Man, because what I've heard in the answer primarily is that there's a lot of reliance on local authorities and individuals to pull that in rather than for government to reach out. And perhaps the Minister can take this final opportunity to just give me that reassurance that government is actually interested in getting out there to the people in their communities.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Speaker's made a good point. Communication is two-way, not just one way. And I put on record that we are reaching out to local authorities, to the post office, to the community, because every one of us, I'm sure, wants the best public service delivered in a one public service way, efficiently and smartly. And I'm reaching out today, but you can't only talk to people, you have to listen to people. And quite often, the interest that comes back is, where's the money? Where's the money? Where's the money? And that's not where we are now. Where we are is we need to deliver smart public service in a joined up, cooperative, one public service way.